If you're watching this channel, it's because you don't enjoy watching the world squander what Christendom built, but you want to do your part. And chances are you've heard me mention a great means by doing just that. Email made by and for Catholics. Check out fidei.email. That's FIDEI.email. Built for Catholic individuals, families, organizations, and groups. They're private, secure, and of course, they're Catholic. And they're offering 2 months off on your first year for an annual subscription if you enter the coupon code Return to Tradition without spaces. That's the name of this channel, without spaces, at checkout.
It's pretty obvious that the deaconesses issue is going to be one of the issues of 2024 in the Catholic Church. The Synod on Synodality is still ongoing, and the deaconess issue was pretty much given new life by the Synod on Synodality, while at the same time Synod leaders reassure the faithful that they are in fact not pursuing those kind of changes, that the things that they're pushing for are procedural changes, process changes, to bring the laity more involved into the life of governing the Church. But while all that's happening, Francis has been having meetings with various advocates for deaconesses, despite 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, saying that it is impossible for him to change the holy orders. It's just impossible for him to do it. But then he's been having these meetings. And so the argument that's been happening now has been for a non-ordained diaconate to include women. And while this is going on, there's been some not terribly subtle propaganda happening related to this, and we're going to talk about that right now. So, headline from America Magazine: the Catholic Church doesn't need transitional deacons. I've been sitting on this story for a few days because, in addition to some really wild things happening in far-flung parts of the church that I felt were a little more important, and the need to maybe take a bit of a breather from the deaconettes issue, never once in this story, never one time, do they mention deaconesses or a women's diaconate. Never one time. But that's obviously the point of this. They want to change holy orders by removing the sacrament of holy orders as the prerequisite for becoming a deacon, as core to the process of somebody becoming a deacon, whether it's a permanent deacon or a transitional deacon. And the consequences of that are pretty obvious. Once you remove holy orders, the sacrament, which is unquestionably theologically limited in who can receive it, once you remove that obstacle out of the way, all of a sudden there is no argument anymore for the exclusive nature of the diaconate as it has existed since the beginning of the Church. Now, this begins with a stunning admission. This article does. The Synod on Synodality was asked to reimagine the diaconate. Reimagine it. Meaning, think of ways to reinvent the diaconate, to change it, to make it something new, to call the diaconate that would replace the diaconate. That's what it is, a new diaconate to replace essentially the old. Or at the very least, to substantially and fundamentally reform the diaconate permanently. Remember all of this, while in the background of all this, you have Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who some think might be a successor to Francis, and others have said Francis's changes to the Church are unchangeable, that they're going to be permanent. Keep all this in mind, because this is all a stunning admission here, that they want to change the diaconate by removing holy orders from it. So here's what America Magazine has to say on this. Quote, in an October 2023 interview, Cardinal Robert McElroy of San Diego and Cardinal Blaise Cupich of Chicago said that the General Assembly of the Synod on Synodality raised the question of reimagining or re-envisioning the diaconate as a whole. It is precisely such a revisioning that many historians and theologians of the diaconate have been engaged with for many years, so it is affirming to hear two prominent church leaders express such a view. In particular, Cardinal Cupich and Cardinal McElroy raised the question of whether it remained necessary or even desirable to ordain seminarians to the diaconate prior to ordination to the presbyterate. This suggestion is not new. I want to offer some rationale as to why eliminating a seminary diaconate, what I have referred to elsewhere as an apprentice model of the diaconate, is not only possible but necessary for envisioning a mature and fully formed diaconate for the future. End quote. Those words at the end are very carefully chosen. What would be a mature and fully formed diaconate for the future? Well, first and foremost, they're saying that the diaconate as it exists now is not mature and is not fully formed. So let's go with fully formed first. What does that mean? What's it missing? Well, it's missing about 51% of the population. That's what it means. About half the population of human beings cannot become deacons. So it's not fully formed. And because of that, it's not mature, because it doesn't accept the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, on such issues. That's why it's not mature or fully formed. This is aligning the world's values to the church. The church submitting to those values, inch by inch, until what is being peddled as Catholicism is really not Catholicism anymore. And how long that's been the case for, I'll leave you to decide. But it's an incredible admission that the Synod explicitly asked the participants to come up with a sort of new form of the diaconate, to reimagine the diaconate. It's not surprising that Cupich and McElroy were the driving force behind the need to keep them ordained, because Cupich and McElroy are the voices of Francis for the episcopate in America. That's what they do. They are Francis's voices to their brother bishops in the United States. The U.S., where you're probably going to see some of the biggest pushback against this. But here comes their justification. The author of that article goes over the history of development of the diaconate, starting by their own admission that the diaconate was started out as ordained in the ancient church, and then the ordination of the deacon being developed to include several sub-orders that Paul VI, on his own volition, abolished after the council. He did that. He got rid of ordained offices, including subdeacons and things, completely. Just got rid of them completely on his own volition. It's one of the reasons you see sedevacantist saying that that much of what goes on in the church isn't Catholic anymore, that none of these men are actually Catholic, is because the changes to the church after the council were so radical that it's hard to actually accept anything that they've done as Catholic afterwards. That's part of their argument. But all that is a setup for the main argument. According to these bishops here in the article, we don't need ordained deacons at all. But they never really say why, which I'll go over here in a moment, why they really say why. Here's what they say, quote, "The overall purpose of sequential ordination was to ensure candidates for the higher orders had gained experience in ministry before assuming greater responsibilities. In the seminary system, tonsure, the minor orders, then subdiaconate, and diaconate were all tied to different stages of seminary formation. Seminarians nearing the end of the process would be ordained deacons and then sent into a parish setting for a period of time prior to ordination into the presbyterate. This has been replaced by a pastoral year that normally precedes diaconal ordination. In a practical sense, one might question the purpose of requiring ordination to the diaconate as a prerequisite to presbyterial ordination, meaning ordination to the priesthood. Of course, it is sometimes suggested that the diaconal ordination is essential for those en route to the presbyterate and episcopate because it grounds them in the foundation of all ministry, the church's diaconia. While this sounds reasonable, it would also seem to be the case that all ministry, lay, religious, and ordained, is grounded in diaconia and therefore more of an effective baptism than holy orders. The new edition of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops program of priestly formation includes a vocational synthesis stage, during which a seminarian deacon would go outside the walls of the seminary into a parish assignment for some period of time, likely 6 to 12 months. The text pains to declare that this is not a stage in which the seminarian is undergoing on-the-job training, but that he is coming into a fuller appreciation of the demands and blessings of the clerical state. Still, the whole feel of this section of the program of formation is of an apprenticeship, as a seminarian deacon is incorporated into the community of the clergy within the diocese, an incorporation that is still focused on his eventual ordination into the presbyterate, not an appreciation of the diaconate in its own sacramental identity. The sacramental goal lies ahead. Finally, I would further point out that a seminarian's formation, no matter how lengthy, is focused on one direction, the presbyterate. At no point is the seminarian discerning a vocation to the diaconate, which serves merely as a final step in his preparation for presbyterate. It is truly an apprenticeship model, but a vocation to one order does not and should not presume a vocation to another." End quote. By the way, looming large over this that they're ignoring is the permanent diaconate. They're casually ignoring the existence, seemingly, of the permanent diaconate, which is the only place in the church where you see consistent growth in holy orders, is the permanent diaconate. Okay? Just sort of casually ignoring that because it kind of undermines their whole argument. But they're trying to get you to accept something here, and that's removing ordination as a central part of the diaconate. But why? Their excuse is that most people see deacons as a temporary stop on the road to becoming a priest, and that because words matter, we should never treat a sacrament in this way. Fair enough, I guess, but that's pure gaslighting. An argument for deaconesses is never explicitly made here. The article is crafted very carefully to never ever mention opening up holy orders to women. But make no mistake, if becoming a deacon no longer requires the sacrament of holy orders, then there is no theological reason to not make deaconettes that are on equal footing with the newly formed deacons. Why? Because there's a very, very real push in pretty much all of the apostolic churches to embrace the spirit of the age by opening holy orders to deaconesses. We saw this with the Orthodox. I covered that last week. Many people were shocked to see it. And then they were shocked to see theologians, Orthodox theologians, saying, oh yeah, this isn't that big of a deal, even though clearly they had just opened up the ordained diaconate in the way the world wants it opened up. But this headline comes from Catholic.de. Deaconesses is the starting blocks, more enthusiasm than frustration. Once again, Catholic women have used the recent Day of the Deaconess to promote their cause. However, the frustration at the lack of ordination of women in the ministry is also mixed with cautious optimism. Those with the spirit of the world, the spirit of the age, are cautiously optimistic about the possibility of deaconesses being opened up to them. Why shouldn't they? High-ranking cardinals, practically the entire German episcopate is behind this, so is all of the Bergoglian bishops in America, and well as other places. And after we saw this play out in the Orthodox Church recently, as they begun ordaining deaconesses in at least one of their ecclesial communions, especially in a subset of the Greek Orthodox Church, of course these people are optimistic about this, because the Orthodox of all people should have been the most vociferous against this, but at least some of them are going along with this. No one expected that to happen, but it's become the reality. In that Catholic article, they quote a former, quote, pastoral counselor named Bridget Schmidt, who admits that the deaconess movement got a huge boost from the Synod on Synodality, and that they're looking forward now to being able to officiate weddings, funerals, baptisms, and of course, proclaim the gospel, and give homilies like the ordained deacons do now in the Novus Ordo Mass. This is a huge international movement, and it's clearly coordinated. And frankly, it looks like enough pressure is being put on the Vatican to give them the non-ordained deaconesses. But remember, it already looks like Francis is on board with this. He can't change the rules on ordination, but maybe he can give them non-ordained deaconesses. If you thought the outcome of Fiducia Supplicans was divisive, you have seen nothing yet. But remember, America Magazine is a voice for Rome in the U.S., Supich, McElroy, the two cardinals cited as pushing for radical changes to the diaconate, are the voices of Francis for the episcopate in the United States. Bear that in mind. It's coming, in some form or another. I'd be shocked if it didn't. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.